What's up, everybody? My name's Haelian, and I'm here today to discuss the classes in Rogue Legacy 2 and rank them in a classic tier list, and hopefully I can help some new players or just some other regular players know what might work best for them, what works best for me, and what I like the most. For a little bit of background on myself, I played Rogue Legacy 2 throughout the early access. I've seen a lot of changes to the different classes. I have almost 150 hours in the game. I had hundreds of hours in the original game, so it's a game I really love, and I hope I can share some knowledge with you today. Real quick, if you like this kind of content and you want to see more of it, remember to like, comment, subscribe, please. Tell me what your favorite classes are, what your least favorite classes are in the comments below, and just let me know overall what you think. And last thing before we get started, I just want to talk about, some classes, they're good for farming, they're good for bosses, sometimes they're kind of good at both or kind of bad at both. I'll talk through all of that and kind of give an overall ranking, how I feel about them in the game, how easy they are to utilize, how good they are versus bosses, how good they are for exploring or farming gold and things of that nature, and kind of give them a rank based on all those different factors. So let us get started here. There are 15 classes in Rogue Legacy 2, and the first one is going to be Assassin. So Assassin, I kind of like Assassin. They're okay. They're pretty strong. They attack very rapidly with their basic attack, and the last strike is a crit, I believe. They have the talent skill, which makes them invulnerable to damage, which is always really important that each class has some kind of utility to escape bad situations or lots of projectiles or things of that nature. So Assassin kind of fits the bill for the most part. I think having a rapid hitting class like this always has a pretty good place in a game, I think. So if you're able to pair them up with, say, the Poison Relic to apply poison, you can apply those stacks really fast, and it works really well, I think. There's really not much else to say about them. Their talent, Obscura, it has a time cooldown, but I think you can reduce it by hitting the enemy a lot, so it's pretty good. It applies vulnerable if you hit the enemy while using it. They're kind of just middle of the road. I just don't think their DPS is that high. They don't deal a lot of outward damage, I think, most of the time. So compared to some other classes, they're just not super amazing. But the talent is quite strong, I think. So it's probably going to be a very high B, maybe even a low A, I'm going to say, for Assassin for me. Up next is Astromancer. So this one was added 1.0, and I think it's actually a really, really strong class with a lot of cool features. It has some great synergies. It is essentially a caster class that's meant to regain a lot of mana. So you cast a black hole, you can only have one out there at a time. And so if you take something like your weapon has a 2-second cooldown but deals 100% more damage, it is absolutely perfect for the Astromancer. But the best part of the Astromancer is really the fact that it has great synergies with dots, damage over time spells like Poison Bomb or some kind of burning, because all the damage you deal as Astromancer gets you mana back. So basically casting a spell and dealing that damage over time will help you get that mana back, and it lets you just keep casting spells. So you want to stack a lot of intelligence with the Astromancer. It's also a very different class, which I like. It's very unique in terms of at least the weapon. You have the talent, which makes you invulnerable. The damage, it is quite brief, but the flight kind of gets you out of situations. It also technically deals damage, so it'll get rid of some projectiles and stuff like that. And the cooldown is really short. I think it's like 7 seconds or something like that. I think it's actually quite short. So it's quite good. I mean, they have very low health, of course, as all the casters do, but I think they have like a lot of cheese potential essentially versus the bosses. For exploring, they're still really good for the talent. Since they have that short cooldown talent, you can just wiggle your way in and out of different rooms, and you can just be patient. You can get to a chest and then escape. Same thing with the Assassin, by the way, I forgot to mention. They basically have a very similar one to that. So Astromancer, very good, very possible for cheese, pretty good for exploring. Not the best, I think so. But I think I'm gonna have to put them in a pretty high A, I think. I think they're really good. So you want like Poison Bomb or one of the burning spells that applies burn to enemies, and you'll get your mana back from that spell, and you can really deal a lot of damage, and you can have great range by doing that. You don't really have to be in there like spamming your attack constantly as the Astromancer. So very good class. Next up, we have the Barbarian. Now this one might be my favorite class, just so you know. It's just the ease of use, I think, with the Barbarian is what really, really makes it. So you have the ground attack that is always a skill crit. And if you don't know, skill crits is like the game tells you have to do something specific. in order to get a crit with your weapon, basically. With Barbarian, all you have to do is be on the ground and swing the big axe, and that's it. There's no other specialty. Most of the time, it's like you have to do a dash attack. That's very common. Or maybe it's like the last bullets, like with the Gunslinger or something like that. Just having that really, really, really simplified skill crit means that they have absolutely outstanding DPS, really. You can deal out a lot of damage. I do think the aerial attack in Barbarian is quite weak, but that's okay because it makes up for it with the ground attack, really. It feels like the air attack is more of a utility. You know, you get rid of those projectiles that you need to attack and stuff like that. Then you got the talent, which is really strong. It destroys essentially every projectile. I think even large projectiles, right? Yeah, it destroys large projectiles. So every projectile that's coming at you, it's going to destroy. And the only downside to that is you have to get hit for it to recharge. So you can use it, get hit, use it, get hit, use it, get hit. It kind of means that in a lot of scenarios, you might only get hit half as much. Compile that with the enormous amount of HP that Barbarian has. They have the highest health because they get a plus 20% passive bonus. I think it makes Barbarian just incredibly strong. And if you're just trying to get a kill on a boss, you know, you could wait for a trait like hero complexity, which doubles your health, but you just can't heal, or what's called hypercoagulation, which is you lose max health when you get hit, but then you also get healed over time. That one's just like insanely strong, but it's really good for something like Barbarian. Barbarian's just like really simple, good for farming, good for bosses. I don't know, I can't really sing its praises enough. It's probably going to be my top S for that point almost at this rate, but we'll have to see. I'll have to think about it. There's just not a lot of bad things. There's not a lot of things that the Barbarian's bad at. I mean, you don't have a lot of safety with the Barbarian because you have to be up inside a mob's face and stuff like that. And if they are just a little bit off the ground, you're kind of in trouble a lot of times with trying to kill them. Like if you got a lot of floating enemies, it's kind of a struggle. So I guess in a sense, exploring could be tough with the Barbarian, but that boss damage is just too insane to ignore. All right, the Bard. So if you asked me about a week ago how I felt about the Bard, I would not have good things to say, to be quite honest. So with the Bard, I had to force myself to play it to get to like it. I think it has a rather high skill floor or ceiling, however you want to describe it. Like, it's pretty tough to get used to the Bard because it plays so differently from the rest of the classes. Like, you want to be in the air constantly the entire time. You're playing the floor is lava with the class, because what you want to do with the basic Bard, not the electric loot one, is you throw a note into the air and you start spin kicking off of it and the enemies and whatever else is around you, and you try to stay in the air to stack that dance buff, and that lets you deal more damage with everything that you have, including the notes, including spells, and, you know, the spin kicks, everything. So if you keep those stacks up, you can really deal a ton of damage. And I think the main strong point for Bard here is that it does kind of simplify some boss fights. Not every boss fight, but just being able to perpetually keep yourself at the top of the room, like at the ceiling, basically. I'm thinking like potentially like the pirate boss. Maybe Enoch was a very simplified for it. Even Tubal was surprisingly easy as the Bard, I gotta say. You just pair that with a good DPS spell and you're just gonna kill things so fast. It does take a lot to get used to because you gotta use that spin kick a lot more. But I'm really glad I did it. I did an entire New Game Plus with Bard only because I think it made me better at the game where I wasn't really utilizing the spin kicks as much as I could have, I think, prior to playing a lot of Bard. So using the Bard just made me do that a lot more. It was a lot of fun. It was just so much fun to play. I don't think Bard is very good at exploring at all, though. I think they're pretty weak because they have a low health pool, and like you can get some damage out there, but when you're just killing 1 or 2 enemies per room, it's pretty hard to like keep up the synergies and combos that Bard actually has. So just killing 1 or 2 enemies at a time is not really the strong point for the Bard, really. It's more for bosses. So having said that, I'm probably going to put it in a low A. It is very difficult to play, but I'd recommend you kind of force yourself to try it out, because I think I found that I just had so much more fun playing Bard than some of the other more boring classes, honestly. But so yeah, try out Bard. Tell me what you think. Oh, by the way, for the Bard, also the talent for the Bard, you get rid of mid-sized projectiles, which is always really, really important. You really need some kind of talent that helps you with the projectiles that are just floating everywhere in this game, right? Like, you just got to have some kind of assistance with that. So I think it's pretty good. It's kind of a long cooldown. It generates a bunch of notes you can spin kick off of, which is kind of fine. Like, I don't think it's that very important. It's just kind of important that it helps you get rid of a lot of projectiles that are coming your way. So pretty decent talent. Not the best, not the worst, but definitely necessary. Next, we have the Boxer. So the Boxer, I don't love to start off. So it has a really good passive. It's called, I think it's called Deft. And it means that you can walk through without getting injured most enemies. Now, what does that mean by most enemies? This does include bosses too. So if the enemy's main point of attacking is that you simply touch it, like the dogs in the snowy area, just touching a dog hurts you. That won't work with the Boxer. You'll still get hurt if you touch a dog. But if the enemy shoots projectiles at you, essentially, then the Boxer can just walk right through them. You can stand right under them and start attacking them, for instance, as a boss. So it makes it like really interesting, but the Boxer, I don't think deals like tons of damage. When you're fighting a boss, you really don't even want to use the uppercut ability for the most part. I think, sorry, not the uppercut. You don't want to use the super punch, basically. So you build up combo, then you use the super punch, and you're supposed to like knock enemies back, but it's kind of pointless versus a boss, which can't be knocked back because you don't get the extra damage from it colliding with a wall and stuff like that. The super punch also does get rid of some projectiles, and you can aim it and stuff like that. It's just not great. They have a lot of health. I just think the damage is kind of low, and the way it works is kind of clunky. It kind of feels cool, and you can manage a lot of small enemies this way, but I don't know if they're really that great for the bosses. It's also not very interesting because you just kind of stand in front of the boss and you hold down the attack button, and that's all you do for most of the fight besides dodging. I don't know, it's something about it doesn't feel as great personally for me. But it's also a class I probably haven't explored as much as I should have. Now, the Enkindled version is actually really cool. That turns your gloves, this is like the Fabled weapon for the Boxer. It turns your gloves into exploding, throwing boxing gloves, but they can hurt you. You can get a skill crit if the enemy's really far away. It can be really good. It can also be absolutely terrible. So if you're in a tight room, you're in big trouble because that explosion AoE is actually really big. If you're in a very large room, especially a large boss room, I think it can actually help you beat a boss very, very easily for that matter. So the Boxer, they're okay. I just haven't found the fun with them quite yet. I think they're going to wind up in a very high C. It's one of those things, like, I wonder if I just force myself to play like 20 hours of Boxer, would I wind up ranking them higher? Probably, but I haven't quite gotten there yet. So I'm just going to throw them in the C then. Next is the Chef. Wow, the Chef. So Chef is a really interesting class. It has something that I don't think any class really has, which is that you can reflect up to mid-sized projectiles. And you should know the difference between the projectiles because it can be quite important. Large projectiles include those really big blue fireballs, which not a lot of classes can deal with. Normally, you just have to dodge them. You can't do much else with them. Chef can't deal with them either. I think like the Barbarian shout gets rid of them, but not much else gets rid of them. But even still, going up to mid-sized projectiles for the Chef to be able to reflect them with the frying pan is really, really useful. It kind of makes up for the fact that the talent doesn't help you get out of situations. You just got the heal, which is absolutely amazing for sustain. So being able to explore and farm gold with the Chef is just top tier. You can't really beat it, I think, in a lot of ways. And then you got the reflecting projectiles, which helps you kind of like cheese some little rooms and stuff like that, and lets you kind of play it safe and stand back, and just so many things it helps with. So you want to do intelligence with the Chef, I think, because the burn that you apply with the frying pan is based on, the damage that does is based off of your intelligence. The actual frying pan damage is based off your strength. So it's kind of like, well, which stat do you focus on? I think intelligence, because how much you heal from the stew is based off your intelligence, and then that way you can just apply burn and then just sit back and let it tick for a while and just play it safe and dodge around. You don't have to keep spamming the attack over and over again. So I think when you want to stack intelligence for the Chef, that's really all I have to say about the Chef. It's just really strong, I think. It might not feel strong, especially like I think I started by trying to stack strength with the Chef at one point. I was just like, this isn't dealing a lot of damage. This isn't that great. But then once you switch to intelligence, you suddenly realize the slow tick of the frying pan does great, actually. And getting mana back from the stew is important too, because if you're just trying to beat a hard boss fight, you can definitely just utilize that sometimes to get the heal and the mana back. Make sure you spend all your mana before you use it, and then you can just cast another spell and stuff like that. So it's kind of a spell caster. Really strong class. I really like it. I think it almost beats Barbarian because of the exploratory purposes, but you still have to kind of manage the boss fights, and I think it doesn't beat out the Shout. But Chef, S tier for cooking up a storm. Wait a minute. I didn't bring up the Fabled weapon for the Chef, which is the spoons. The spoon, the thing is, you're taking away your utility of reflecting projectiles when you take the spoons. I think you can sometimes, depending on things, like get more guaranteed crits with the spoon because it just has to bounce once, but it's also kind of, it's pretty hard. It feels like it's really difficult to play, but you could potentially dole out a lot of damage, I think, if you do take the spoon. I think the main strength of the Chef is definitely the frying pan. I think there's like some cheeses you could do with the spoon, but for the most part, it's a bit wonky. But I think that's sort of the tale for most of the Fabled weapons, is that they're just kind of hard to utilize often. They're more for fun or goofiness, really. All right, Dragon Lancer is next, and Dragon Lancer just sort of had a mild redesign recently in the patches after 1.0. It got some buffs, definitely. The attack animation is much faster, so in other words, you can just simply attack more rapidly as the Dragon Lancer if you just want to spam the attack button. But they're really, really, really pushing us to try to use the Dragon Lancer where you use the charge ability Joust, and that way you can kind of get, that's how you get the skill crit with Dragon Lancer. You hold down the attack button and you charge toward the enemy, and you hit them with a giant attack. The thing is, like, you have to charge it still. And it can be quite difficult. Like, if you run right into a projectile, you're in trouble, essentially, you know what I mean? So that kind of does throw a damper on things a little bit. I haven't found, like, a real rhythm to the Dragon Lancer. I think when they increased the animation speed, I thought, like, oh, maybe it's gonna be way better now. But the damage is still kind of mediocre if you're just spamming the attack, so that you really want to use the Joust. It's just not great for bosses a lot of the times. I think the talent is actually really strong now, Bastion, which blocks like all damage, or maybe it's just all projectiles. Yeah, it destroys all projectiles, pushes enemies back, recharges on hit. So if you get hit, it recharges, I believe. So that got a lot stronger, I think. So that's quite good. I think Dragon Lancer is up and coming, essentially. I don't know if it really needs more buffs. I think it's actually probably pretty strong, but I don't know if it really... Like, it's okay. It has a decent amount of health. It has a lot of armor, which is kind of strange for a class in a way, but that's another discussion. It's kind of okay, I think. It's kind of interesting. They make you try to play the game a different way, which could be viable, but not super easy. It's also like the scaling's kind of weird on some of the attacks. Yeah, like Flying Joust has bonus intelligence scaling. So it's like, do you stack strength or intelligence? I think you just kind of do a little bit of both, maybe, or something, if you can. I don't know. It's kind of hard to know. It's sort of a hybrid class, but I don't know if it really works quite yet. But I don't know. Maybe I need to just play a little bit more. So for that, I'm probably going to put Dragon Lancer low B. It might wind up being the lowest B, I think. Because I think there's at least an element of like fun and interestingness to it. And I think it has a really strong talent, too. Next is the Duelist. So the Duelist has a really strong talent where you have a combat roll and it makes you immune to damage. You can kind of, I think the best method is you like roll through an enemy like a boss to the other side to escape danger, and then you can go back to attacking from the other side potentially. And then you have to wait like a short cooldown for stuff like that. I think getting skill crits with the Duelist is kind of hard because you have to do a dash attack. That's how it is for a lot of classes in the game, unfortunately, which isn't great. But the strength of the Duelist is really how you play it. So what you want to do is be rapidly using the attack button while constantly jumping up and down from the ground, because you can kind of do this combo where the animations reset. It's almost like a nod to Castlevania, because the best DPS output in Castlevania was to jump from the ground and like attack in the air. And when you land on the ground, it cancels the attack animation so you can attack again. And yeah, it's something like that. So you can get a lot of attacks out really, really rapidly with the Duelist if you can do this. But then the struggle is, how many opportunities do you really get to just stand in front of the boss and do that for a long period of time. It's still pretty good, I would say. I would call it pretty good. It's sort of, I think the combat roll kind of makes it, and it's still quite strong overall. I think it's kind of, it's simpler to use than most of the other classes. It sounds hard, but when I'm talking about with the jumping, but really it's not that crazy to think about when you try it out. It's really not that insane. I think it's pretty simple to use. It's simpler than the Astromancer. The talent's really strong. It's normal at, it's kind of just average at a lot of things. That actually makes it kind of tough for me. I think in a way it's probably top of the A tiers in some fashions. But I don't know if I've really used it as a top A tier personally. I'm not sure. Maybe I have. I think I have. I'm gonna say that I have. Duelist, quite strong. Next is Gunslinger. Gunslinger. So, very odd class. You shoot a gun, it has like 22 bullets nowadays, I think, and the last 8 are always a skill crit, so that's pretty usable. You stay in the air as you shoot, which is actually quite useful when you start to think about it, because just lingering in the air in that one spot is actually quite helpful. I think there's a couple weak points, like having to reload in the heat of battle, like adds an extra element that most classes don't have. Like it's an extra, you know, thing that you have to manage and think about, and most classes don't really have that, so it does make it harder. And I don't think the damage output really fits that extra dimension that you have to worry about. And then you got the talent, which is you drop a stick of dynamite. It can destroy some projectiles, but it always drops in this plus sign pattern on the screen, so it might hit the projectiles, it might not. It's kind of iffy. It does deal some damage. The damage is scaled off of your intelligence though, so it's kind of weird. I think the talent is just bizarre in a way. I think it's a cool idea, but I think how they worked the numbers is a bit odd. I think the explosion might need to be bigger and have like a different shape to it or something like that. I think the reload is kind of tough. Like I find myself like I swear I hit the reload button, but I'm not reloading or something. I don't know. That's probably a me problem, so I don't get into that. Reload is a little tough to manage. I think it's not quite there. I think it could use a small buff personally. I just don't think it's super useful as of now. I think you can cheese. It's actually decent for exploring, and you can kind of cheese the small rooms with just a handful of enemies with the kind of range that the Gunslinger has. But is that better than something like the Ranger that can do the same thing but has even more range? Yeah, it's hard to say. So having said that, I'm probably gonna drop it. I'm gonna say a high C. I'm high C, you know what I mean? High C, just like the juice box. All right, next up is the Vanilla Knight. Not much to say, you know, you just swing with your sword, you want to scale with strength. You have the parry move with the block, but then if you successfully parry or block something, it has like a really long cooldown. It's like 10 seconds or something like that. The parry's not too hard to do, where you get the 100% block. It's not insane, it's reasonable, I think. But still, in the heat of battle, it can be quite difficult to utilize well, I think. It's just not the most interesting talent, I think. And then you got the vanilla sword movement. Of course, the knight is just not going to be super interesting to play, I think. You have the pizza knight, the Fabled weapon, which is just, you know, bizarre and goofy, of course, as you'd imagine. So you throw the pizza, and you're meant to dodge it coming back to you to keep it out in the air longer, because on the return, it does skill crits, and yeah, it's just kind of, that's like really hard to utilize, honestly, the Pizza Knight. It's just really hard to use. Dash Strike for Vanilla Knight is what gives you a skill crit, so not very exciting there, I'd say. Just average stats, average everything. I'm probably gonna drop it. You know, it's kind of sad to say, but it's probably, I'd probably rather take it in than the Dragon Lancer, but the Assassin? Probably not the Assassin, I'd say, for me personally. Just not much else to say about it, I think. Next is the Mage, and I kind of feel like they needed a Mage in the game, but I think it didn't quite work out personally. So you get 2 spells, there is no talent with the Mage. So if you lock your spells and stuff in your class, so if you lock a Mage class and like a defensive spell like Wind Wall, it makes the Mage pretty decent. but I don't think you earn really as much mana back as you might think from attacking with the mage. I think the main problem with the mage is incredibly low health pool. And then your attack is just very fixed. Like, you can only shoot like this tiny little distance on the screen, left or right, that's it. No up, no down, like no aiming it, nothing, you know, and you're meant to siphon mana slowly back, kind of, from the enemies you hit. I think it can be really, really hard to explore. I don't think the mage is very good at that at all, honestly. You could definitely burst down some bosses, potentially, depending on the boss, though. I think just the mage, without the sustain to really get anywhere in the game, I just don't think it's that great. It just, the low health pool really hurts it. You have the scythe, which is interesting and different, but it scales with strength, is the problem. So that's the fabled weapon for the mage, is Charon's scythe. So you want to switch to strength-based equipment, and it's kind of crazy. I don't know, it just doesn't really work for me. I think the whole mage just doesn't really work the way it is, especially without like a proper talent and things like that. I'm gonna have to drop it as just not very interesting, not very fun, and just not very strong. Bottom of the seas, baby. So pirate. But seriously, so pirate added 1.0 of the game, so they didn't have it in early access. I think it's just too unique and weird. So let's start with the talent, really. So the talent is you board a pirate ship that gives you flight. You do not have any invulnerability while you're in the air on the pirate ship. You can like fling the pirate ship at enemies and then it explodes and you have these little cannonballs and then the pirate ship burns. So it's like, and all that damage kind of scales with intelligence. So it's like, okay, maybe I want intelligence, but when you swing the cannon, that scales with strength. And then the actual cannonball you fire, if you hold down the attack button after, that scales with strength. So it's like, okay, that doesn't really work. You probably just want strength, honestly. And then like the swing rate of the cannon is just really slow. The damage is not that high. And then it's still, the skill crit is from dashing still, so that's weak. And so it's just not great. It just doesn't do a lot well. It's almost okay at exploring because giving you that option to have like a pretty large lobbing projectile with a big explosion AoE, that's pretty useful to sniping enemies from far away as the pirate. So exploring is okay, but I think the talent is what really kind of breaks it, especially for bosses. It just doesn't really make sense. It's probably the bottom of the pole for me, honestly. So as you can see, I already have this opinion of pirate fixed for the most part, that pirate's just down here. I can see them changing it though and kind of fixing some things about it. Like it needs a utility to escape danger better than you board a vulnerable pirate ship and try to fly away or something like that, I think. Ranger is next, and Ranger is a class that I think I like it for a while, and I like the idea of it, and I'm glad it's in the game, but then it's always kind of winds up hard to use in practice. So the bottom line is if you want to deal a lot of damage with the Ranger, you have to hold down the button to attack and get a like power shot kind of thing. You gotta like time your shot to get a skill crit, which is cool and interesting, but it kind of takes a while, and it means that your actual like damage per second is not quite there. It's okay, you know, that kind of thing. It's kind of medium, I'd say, maybe a little bit higher than medium. But that also makes it really hard to utilize because you can't do anything while you're charging up that attack, you know? You will fall more slowly in the air while you're doing it. But yeah, and then you got the talent, which is you create this ivory canopy, which lets you suspend in the air. And it will block up to like mid-sized projectiles, I think. Yeah, mid-sized projectiles that come from below. So that's kind of convenient. I just don't know if I'd really call it that great. Though I think just compared with the DPS being rather low, and the talent not being a very amazing, I think it's just not great. It's pretty good for exploring. Again, you can snipe those enemies from far away, and you can angle the bow any way you want, which is quite useful. So exploring, quite good. Bosses, really not very good, I think, at all. I almost want to put it in the low B, though. So you got the Ballista Fabled weapon, which is just absolutely insane. It has like really massive amounts of damage, but it's just way too dangerous to use because you can't move or anything, takes forever to charge, etc. I almost want to put it in the B though, honestly, because the health is pretty decent, and for exploring, it's quite good. I'm gonna say it made B. It barely made B though. Only barely did it make the Bs. All right, Ronin is next. Ronin. So it's sort of meant to be the long range melee, right? Because that katana has like a really long range, and you want to stay at a very long range because in order to get a skill crit, you want to hit them with the tipper, you know, the old Marth move there. So you want to hit them with only the tip of the blade, which is surprisingly difficult to do, especially for bosses that are constantly moving, and maybe it's kind of a small room where, you know, you just literally can't be that far away from the enemy. It's kind of iffy, you know, how well that can work. I think the talent's pretty decent, where you can teleport to the other side of the enemy. I just feel like the range is kind of low on it. So the talent, you teleport like a little bit far away, and anything in between gets hit by your katana, essentially. But I feel like the range is kind of low on it. Like, you don't go very far, I feel. Like, it should be a little bit further. It's not like the most interesting kit. He also attacks super slowly. If you're not getting skill crits with the Ronin, then you might as well just not play it, honestly. That's sort of the problem that I'm seeing. Therefore, I think it's just kind of meh, you know? Like, I feel kind of bad throwing it into the seas, but I feel like it kind of belongs there for me personally. Haven't really had a lot of fun with it quite yet. I just don't think the talent's especially strong. Like, it doesn't really get rid of projectiles or anything for you compared to some other classes. And then, you know, the attack rate is so slow, and the skill crit is theoretically easy to get, but then in practice, I think it winds up kind of being a little bit harder. I think I'm gonna drop it kind of a higher C. I kind of would prefer to take a Gunslinger most of the time, I think, but probably more fun than the Boxer still. All right, last is the Valkyrie, and this one might sort of be my favorite class. And I kind of only recently discovered you might just want to put intelligence stacking on them, honestly. I don't know, it kind of depends how you want to play it. So they have the talent with the spinning spear, which gets rid of up to mid-sized projectiles, and it resets the cooldown if you actually deflect a projectile. That's very important. That basically means you can, if you're getting bombarded with projectiles, you can sit there and just tap it, tap it, tap it. Like, you don't have to worry about the cooldown as long as you deflect something. It also gives you back mana, which is kind of insane. You can deal a minor amount of damage if you're near an enemy too when you have that. I think that paired with how fluid the weapon is, so you can attack up, you can attack down, left and right. You can aim your attack a little bit more easily. It also lets you explore a little bit more easily for that matter, because you can, you know, aim the weapon up, which you're not normally able to do, and possibly hit an enemy through a floor or something like that. I think it's incredibly strong. They have a decent amount of health and mana too, like that's all pretty high. And so with the deflecting and everything, you can potentially think about stacking intelligence and just cast a lot of spells and things like that. I think it's really strong. Maybe the strongest in some scenarios, you know, like sometimes the Valkyrie is absolutely amazing, sometimes it's just not very useful. You know, it depends on how many projectiles are coming to you and what size they are to some degree. But nevertheless, I'm gonna have to put them all the way, I think, just right behind Barbarian. I think that feels about right. I think that's about right, yeah. Love the Valkyrie, can't recommend it enough. All right, that does it for my tier list. Tell me what you all think. And it just so happened to kind of work out rather evenly, I gotta say. It's kind of interesting how that tends to happen, you know. But yeah, comment down below what you think. If you think I'm wrong, if you think I'm right, what your favorite classes are and stuff like that. And if you don't mind, like, comment, subscribe if you like this kind of content. And I just want to close up by saying all the classes in Rogue Legacy 2 are fun. They have their own little niche spots where they shine, I think, like that. They're all pretty much, you know, viable in their own sense. So I think the balance of the game is still quite even overall, personally. But yeah, thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you all in the next video. Bye, everyone.
Pardon me, could I have a meowment of your time, YouTube? It's me, Grandpaw, Haelian's beloved kitty cat wonder. If you love this hysterical content, pitter-patter your way over to twitch.tv/Haelian, where we stream every Sunday, Monday, Wednesday and Friday at 12 PM Eastern. I loaf you. Nya.